Newsfile is your most authoritative news analysis show. And this morning, sorry to disappoint you, but I don't have a take, and it is because my take is 5 minutes. I want to dedicate the 5 minutes to sharing with you a video from June 3 disaster. But I'd like to introduce you. What I do on my take is to do all the research and compress all of that into 5 minutes to share with you. I'd like to invite you to visit this book. It's called The Law of Taxation in Ghana. The 4th edition is authored by Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, Abdallah Ali Nachia, and William Kofi Owusu Demitia. And I'm talking about some of the foremost tax people in this country. You can talk about tax without reference to Ali Nachia, for example. Well, he taught me tax law. Benjamin Kumbo didn't teach me tax law in class, but he taught me through one of his books. So I want to invite you to look for this book, The Law of Taxation in Ghana, the 4th edition by these three illustrious sons of this country. As far as taxation is concerned, you know what? We ought to pay tax to help the state to take good care of us. But we ought to know what exactly it entails to be paying the tax, the purposes for the tax, and what we can also do to hold authority responsible for how they spend the tax we pay, so that we cannot have a motorway which is a death trap full of potholes. And it takes one man to be shouting all over the place on radio before the state begins to think that it should do something about it. What benefits do you get when you pay tax? What are the liabilities that you get into if you don't pay tax? You find all of them in this small book. You buy it, read it for yourself. Everybody must pay tax, and of course, everybody must also hold the authorities responsible for how their tax is used. We say normally for the public good, but how much of that gets into the public good? So get the Law of Taxation in Ghana, the 4th edition, by these very prominent and good writers and teachers of tax law, and get all of it in there for yourself. There are certain benefits that people don't know that as couple, as family, you can enjoy if you pay tax. People don't know about that. And also, if you're into some business, you may not know that there are ways that you can avoid tax. Tax evasion is what is punished by law, but tax avoidance is not punished by law. And tax avoidance, you will be taught in this book how to avoid tax. Do legitimate business and avoid tax. Everybody's afraid of tax. Thank you very much. Now, I'm very excited to introduce my guest for this morning, because I am so sure that we are going to have a very, very, very interesting discussion. You will enjoy it, and in the end, you will be edified, more than edified. And my guest in the studio, you never knew that he's some taxman of sorts. He just wants to be known as a lawyer. But he's also, a crusader on the Tema motorway. So Ace Ankuma, Anan Ankuma, is the man I'm talking about. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Always excited to have you.
Tax was my former life.
It's your former life. Okay. And then also in the studio, I'm particularly excited about having him on the show, and this will be the first time in many, many, many years. Dr. Nana Ayew-Afriyie is MP, Ifijase Asokore, and Vice Chairman, Health Committee of Parliament. Good morning and welcome, Doctor.
Good morning, Samson.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
And whenever he comes on the show, he gives you the headlines, and very educative ones. Mahama Ayaraga, he's a lawyer and MP, Boku Central constituency. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Also, we'll be joined by our regular panelist and editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, Abdul Malik Kweku Bako. His documents are already here. backs of documents are already here. So I suspect that he may be in there getting mic'd and ready for the show. Now, you know what happened on the 7th of this month. Very, very heart-rending. But it's not new to us, is it? Because after all, this took, if you like, in a language that you may not really be happy about, but this took only 7 lives. Only 7 lives. Shall we be lucky next time? And must we count on luck? What happens to the persons who are obviously negligent, resulting in these disasters, so to speak? Are they really things that must be happening? The government has done something. The cabinet has issued some very tough, new ways to go about this. But what is exactly new about these? Are they not the same things that the authorities were supposed to be doing? These are major issue for this morning, and we invite you to join us. Before we start the discussion, let me say once again, welcome to Kukubako.
Thank you.
Before we start the discussion, let's listen to persons from the Vice President to the President and others who visited the Atomic Junction gas filling station site, and the things they had to say and the feelings they had to express before we start the discussion. Let's listen to them.
As I talk to you now, we are saddled with so much disaster on our hands. In Achuman-Ponua today, almost about 9 people lost their lives. The boat capsized in Achuman-Ponua. Our team is there. And other areas.
We have some people also dying from the flood. So it looks like...
It's unfortunate, but the disasters are happening all over. So we wouldn't want to rush in taking decisions as to what should be done and what should not be done. But the proper thing will be done to avert such disasters from happening. This is not natural disaster. This is man-made. If it's natural, there isn't much you can do about it. But this is man-made disaster. We should be able to put in tighter laws and put in a lot of things to make it known.
A lot of people I've been speaking to here are calling for relocation of, filling stations like this one.
That is a Ghanaian feeling. When it happens, everybody will scream.
And that is a NADMO feeling as well, because they also say that that's the NADMO feeling as well.
The problem is, when we start implementing, they'll say, put a human face to it. If we're able to jump beyond that human face element, and we are all ready to bite the bullet, we would make sure our country is safe for everybody. And that is our prayer. So I'll call on Ghanaians. Let us take advantage of this unfortunate incident to join NADMO in implementing laws to make sure that we don't have those human face element. As I'm talking to you today, in Adenta, there's a waiting disaster there. A slum that has sprung up just along the river, a river bank, less than 5 meters from the river. When we intended to go and get the assembly to demolish, they told us human face. Until today, that slum is still sitting there. So if we will join forces and put out that human face element, and let's bite the bullet and make sure the right thing is done.
We think that if health and safety issues are considered in such a instance, we will not be having some of these things. I mean, we just have to be careful in the way we do our things. If a tanker has come to discharge, there are certain standards, safety standards that you have to follow. And this is a global practice. It appears that in this country, we just take everything for granted. And then the worst happens before we wake up. It's quite unfortunate. Issuance of permit for people to cite fuel station goes through a lot of procedures, and a lot of stakeholders are considered in the approval of permit. First of all, EPA has to check and give a no objection to the permit. In fact, the city authority gives approval as a last resort when they have gone through all the processes from MPA, EPA, and then before they come to the city authority. So we looked at all the reports from the respective agencies before we give our approval. And in the Accra city planning, there are areas considered strictly residential, there are areas considered mixed use, and there are also areas considered for industrial purposes. So when an area is declared as mixed use, it means that you can also allow the fuel station to also be sited. However, I mean, my personal view is that we should also consider the number of fuel stations also springing up.
This is one too many. This is one too many. This is about the 8th explosion of gas in 3 years. And I think what Ghanaians really want is solid policy to deal with this matter once and for all. We are going to move to deal with it. It's not about committees and committees upon committees and nothing gets done. I think that we owe it to the country, and the government is going to take this very seriously. Discussions were being held last night about the way forward. We wouldn't preempt too many things, but some new policies are going to come in. And those who will try to resist those new policies, I don't think they will be listened to, because it's important for us to put the safety of our people above everything else. And I think it's in the interest of the country that we actually implement some new policy directions. The National Petroleum Authority, the EPA, the Energy Ministry, all of us, Fire Service, they're all going to be involved as we put this new policy together. And we're going to move quite quickly to do it. It's not going to be one that you wait weeks for it to happen. It's going to happen relatively quickly.
Can you go back, please?
Event that happened before the fire eventually went off, destroying the 2 filling stations, some vehicles that were parked here, and a few other items. Now, the information, as you may be aware, is that 7 people died as a result, and we have 100 people receiving treatment at various hospitals. The president came in the company of the chief of staff, his deputy, and some other government officials. And then right from here, we speak to the media and then head to the hospital to also visit those who are receiving treatment. When he is done, the briefing that he's been given now, he will now open up to the media and then speak to us about his government plans going forward. Sorry, 1 minute.
The fortunate thing is that the fuel for this station is underground inside. If the fuel has been part of the gas explosion,
Wow. But I'm told this is the last 3 years.
in the last 3 years.
They didn't count some of them. Okay, so I have to count some more for.
But it's one too many.
It's one too many.
This one is one.
So we're going to be able to put a stop to
Yes.
by policy.
Yes.
I think the Ghanaian people need to be reassured that we have an answer, because this is unacceptable.
Yes. We leave.
So in the event of an explosion, most likely we are going to have more casualties. And secondly, we also indicated to them that they need to have enough and visible signs on the forecourt, so that everybody who comes to the forecourt will be able to at least see the sign and then adhere to them. The last thing which we indicated to them also was to the effect that customers get too close to the point of refill. So they need to get a reserve area where customers will have will rest and then have the cylinders refilled. We followed up with another visit sometime in July, and they had corrected some of them. except the bit about the decongestion. So there was a taxi rank around, trotro drivers could discharge passengers, take passengers from there. There were commercial activities, very vibrant commercial activities, that to a very large extent had reduced. Additionally, they were not required to do discharge beyond 6 p.m. And the preliminary information that we have received suggested that the discharge was going way into the night. So that made it difficult for us to be able to contain the situation. But by and large, because the place was decongested, we would have recorded more casualties, but for the fact that they had complied with those compliance letters that we sent to them.
The most important thing is that we take immediate action to assure Ghanaians that we've come to the end of this road.
This is what happened to Alan's sister.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Yeah. So, Mr. President, on Thursday we'll perform
and then a statement be prepared for the country.
Right.
And the proposal you have in mind is something that has been worked out in other places.
Mr. President, actually it is happening in Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Senegal. Ghana is by and large an exception.
Let me have a look at it before cabinet.
I'll bring it.
Yes. We are the exception. We are the exception, actually.
You're welcome back. So you heard and saw the NADMO Deputy Director. You heard and saw Hassan Tampuli, who is the MPA boss. You heard the Vice President, the President. You heard Mr. Jacko, the Energy Minister. All of them, trying to understand the situation at the moment, and also seeking to help the President appreciate the issues. And you heard also the President. And of course, the conclusion from those visits was that we must have an end to this. Have we really come to an end of these kind of things? The Vice President said this is the 8th of such, and that it is one too many. Have we really learned any lessons? We said never again after June 3. I'll share with you what June 3 discovered by the investigative report that, for one reason or the other, authorities don't seem to want to release, and because of that, everybody says the report is not, we can't find a report, and all of that. I'll share with you the reports and the recommendations and ask the question, if we had implemented a quarter of those recommendations, was it possible to see further of these developments? It happened in La, and the President refers to it, where the Minister of Trade, unfortunately, lost his sister in that. How many people are we going to lose in these disasters that are caused by pure negligence and authorities failing to do their job? Okay, now, so I want to start with you, Honorable Ayariga. Thankfully, you in June 3, you were the minister. You sought to go around the country, and also issued, similar, tough talking stance, as we have heard. We have heard the present administration suggesting. What do you think is happening? What exactly is going on?
Thank you very much. And since this incident, I've had the occasion to speak to the issues, and I've said so many things. One is that, there are institutional issues implicated, and there are also attitudinal issues implicated. The institutional issues relate both to the adequacy of regulations, whether we have adequate regulations, are using the best standards, and Secondly, whether we have the best human resource to deal with situations like this, and whether the existing institutions are coordinating adequately to resolve a problem like this. For a person to set up a gas station or a fuel station, you will find out that not less than 4 institutions will be involved, starting with the local authorities who will zone the place for commercial activity, then to the EPA, which will grant an environmental permit, then to the fire service, which will grant a fire permit, then to the National Petroleum Authority, which will grant a license for you to dispense petroleum products. So many institutions are implicated in that process. And very often there's a problem of coordination. And also the question is whether they are all doing their work as required of them. I recall that there were many instances when I would go to a site and I'll be convinced that there's really no justification for citing a station there. I will take a decision that the place should be shut down. But then the owner will approach you with every single permit that is required. And agencies directly under you would have given the person a permit. And they will claim to be the technical people with the competence to determine whether or not a permit should be issued in relation to that particular location. So there's that popular sentiment that gives an indication that they feel certain locations are inappropriate for the siting of fuel stations. But then the technical people will say, you can site a fuel station or a gas station anywhere, except that depending on where you are siting it, there is a heightened level of safety responsibility on the person who is siting it. I recall that I had a petition from students from Islamic Secondary School in Kumasi, in Asawase. The students were objecting to the establishment of a gas station directly opposite the school. I went to Kumasi, I went to the site with the EPA officers and all the engineers. And they first said the distance between the gas station and the first block building on the school campus was within the allowable distance. Second thing is, because of the issues that the students raised, they decided that the tank should be underground. So the recommendation of the EPA officers was that he should construct, I think, a 6 or 7 inch thick concrete bunker where he should hide the tank. So many other recommendations. And this businessman actually was complying. I saw the construction, in all fairness to this gentleman. So I even asked him, if you construct this underground tanker, are you sure you will break even? And he said, based on his market survey, it was a very profitable venture. And in fact, residents were happy because they were traveling very far to buy gas to fill their cylinders. So for him, it was okay. But the students were against. He had his permits. But as a minister, he said, no, you still cannot establish your gas station here. And I was opening myself up to a legal suit. So I told him that, look, in my opinion, and I told the EPA staff that you can meet all the technical specifications, but then there's also something called social impact assessment. If you have 2,000 young boys and girls just across the street, and they have an objection to a project within 100 meters of their location, and you don't listen to them, it is perfectly possible that you can meet all the specifications that the engineers may indicate, and yet one student one early morning can wake up and decide that he's going to destroy this thing by going to light the place up. So there's a social dimension of your assessment. So to that extent, we need to also listen to communities that have strong objection to stations being sited close to them. But let's start on the technical assumption that it is not technically wrong for a station to be located anywhere if all the engineering measures are put in place to ensure adequate safety. And the EPA staff made me see this clearly one day when we were driving to the UN headquarters to sign the climate change agreement. because we had signed, I mean, Ghana, was part of those who signed. And that morning, we were driving to the head office. And then the EPA officer was sitting in the car with me, and he kept showing me station after station, right in Manhattan, right in front of 30, 40-story apartment buildings. As a minister, you are going around shutting down stations simply because they are in residential area. Look at this station, 20-story, 30-story. So it's more of the safety measures that have been put in place than the location. So that is one thing. Then the second attitudinal issue is whether or not the officers are actually adhering to the standards when they are issuing these permits. Are they actually adhering to the standards, or are they acting under inappropriate influences? For me, that is a critical issue. And if indeed that is what is happening, who is going to be able to oversee these people? And let me give you a technical challenge. Under the EPA laws, if there's a problem with an EPA permit, an applicant for permit may petition the Minister for Environment to review a decision. Now, for the Minister to be able to review the decision, he needs to show that he has sound reasoning for doing that. And so there's a committee that he has to set up. Very often, the Minister doesn't have the resources to set up this technical committee to review the decision of the entire EPA. And sometimes I will call on somebody from the chemistry department of the University of Ghana, one of the professors. But the charge, the ministry's budget may not be, able to absorb those costs. So the capacity to review the decisions of the technical people. So if the NPA issues a license, whether the energy minister will have the technical competence to review a decision of the technical department of the NPA. So the review mechanisms, let's also look at that and strengthen those ones. Then the attitudinal issues in relation to the practitioners, the owners of the stations. Once somebody applies for permits, and at the time of the granting of the permit, he is able to meet all the requirements, and he starts operating. The practices sustaining a very heightened level of diligence in ensuring safety is something that should become a culture of these enterprises. But whether they are doing that, are they employing competent hands to do those things that are required to be done at these places? In this instance, the impression I get so far, listening to the discussion, we don't have a formal report yet, but the impression I get is that it was as a result of some recklessness arising from a process of discharge. So clearly, this is human error.
We'll be talking to the authorities who are directly involved to tell us exactly what
they think
it is, yes. Because the Ghana National Fire Service also gave us an indication that the report was 90% complete and should have been submitted by close of work yesterday. So we'll find out whether it is in. If it's not in, at least there'll be an interim report. What does it say?
Yes, so let me just round up on that point. So the issue is the attitudes of those who own fuel stations and how we can address that. If we do all the things that we are doing and we still don't address the attitudes, I can assure you that we're going to experience more of these incidents. And let me just also indicate that as for accidents, sometimes even in jurisdictions where you have the highest levels of standards, once in a while, an accident will occur. So accidents are accidents. But recklessness, general attitude of recklessness, which increases the risk of accidents occurring, are the issues that we are dealing with. So for me, how do we deal with the attitudinal problem of owners of fuel stations? And when this occurred, one of the issues I raised, which became controversial, was that we should start suing the owners for the damage caused, those who suffer loss as a result of that. And I believe that the financial bite will also play a role in shaping the attitudes of owners of fuel stations. The last one that occurred before this one, that was major, 154 people died, 154 people got injured, so much property damage. Nobody, I haven't heard anyone suing anybody to recover anything. We haven't given the judges the opportunity to hand down some hefty punitive damages,
well,
which
for,
will
for
entail...
information, it does appear there is one suit in the pipeline.
Okay.
As regards that.
Precisely.
Because some of those people are still in hospital.
Precisely. So those are the issues. If judges start getting involved and handing down very huge punitive damages, and insurance companies are also suffering, and the owners are having to sell other property to pay, it will send a signal to other owners of stations that
but
they
you limit
must change their
limit your
attitudes.
focus on owners of the stations. It does appear that you are very much aware of even the recommendations that came out of that report. And in that report, the state also took a great part of the fault, so to speak, because you remember one of the recommendations you began to implement, what led to the flooding? Plastics. I don't know how far you went with that plastics program, but let's do this. Let's just take a little reflection on June 3 and come back to answer very pertinent questions aimed at ensuring that, as the cabinet appears to be doing, we really will not get to this any longer.
Right. As I speak to you currently, I'm standing close to DCB towers, and I can see glowing clouds out here inside. It is burning, and I can see the fire just in front of me. I'm just going to the flat to see if I can get a little bit closer. Now, it looks to me like the filling station, yes, it's close to the filling station, and just like 300 meters away from the filling station, the fire is onto the market, getting close to the market.
If you other side, your back, if you say you will all come. If your back, and I be facing a precope, into whom baby or befa. Insurance, so I am my way you. And you went to me in your new one, Musa. And now, quite say, insurance Jandia, oh, why? A moody over train may be a big cool. If it's insurance, your woman, your niche, I say, insurance crowd checker. Now, Winnie Pampo. Tonight, as I wanted dear, I cheat a ratty. A Jane Bassano, medium woman, dear, me family, dear, me answer. My bonfire said, oh, what dear, no minimum, if you say, sure, minimum jarry. Not the ensure Nayana, me told my memu, and a giant so a semi memu, and the eye dear. And the men one say, machines, you know, bonfire the man say, machines, you know. Machines, you many to see me, man, who she be. No quarry, the American, many dear me, who she is a many with Nash. Bear my soul, and I'm a bit as someone can can't.
Me, that's my wife, my junior brother, and one sister. I supposed to take them to go to home, but I tried to go, but the water, everywhere water. My wife just he told me that there was a fire, that I just take them to run away. 10 minutes ago, the fire just catch my head. I tried to save myself, I can't. They are all dead. My wife, my junior brother, and my sister. That day, he like, I know what to do. Yeah, I just control myself. And the advice the doctor told me, I just control myself. Not easy for me. Thank God, still I'm alive.
June 3rd is a function of a number of things, but we have to take them one after the other. Fire. There was a flood and there was fire. Fire needs three things to really get, to become the inferno it was. One, it needs fuel, it needs oxygen, and it needs a spark. You can't do too much about oxygen. And in our line of job, it's our responsibility to actually keep fuel safe. Hydrocarbons were definitely displaced. And the fire report, which has not been seen but has already only been spoken about by some of the fire officers, suggests that it was displaced because some underground tank was not well closed. That has to be looked into. Who faulted in this role? If you faulted in making sure that fuel was not exposed to spark, then you take responsibility for it. The policy people, the government agencies, those who had responsibilities to make sure possibly their odor was well desilted. Did they do their job? People must be held accountable all through the chain. Why did the flood happen? Who failed to do his job to make sure the flood possibly wouldn't have happened the way it did?
That's another thing. I mean, when things like this happen, the reports, you know, a committee is set up to look into it. They come up with their reports, and we're supposed to have that report freely made available to anybody at all. That's the least we could do for the people who have died as a result, that they will know that their lives they didn't die in vain. At least something good came out of it.
The lessons we have learned, we've held workshops, I have participated in a number of them. The actions that were expected to be implemented, were they implemented after we learned the lessons? That is where my problem is. We learned the lessons. We said never again. These things should not happen again. We made all the pledges and then all of that. I remember in one of the discussion panels I was in, one of the former mayors of AMA, he said, oh, we should prepare tea next year. A mayor from 20 years ago, he said we should prepare tea, get everything ready. Next year, they'll be flattening in Accra, I will be invited again. So make sure you have your snack ready to invite us to come and talk. And we'll come and say the same thing. And that thing will happen next year. Very sad.
All right, so just a bit of a reflection of what happened on June 3rd, 2015, and we're here. And like I said, in due course of this discussion, I will share with you some of the recommendations that came out and ask you to point if you have seen that a single of those recommendations are being implemented. Remember that 150 plus persons died. I don't like to use died, were killed in this. It could have been avoided, if you ask me. And properties, people's buildings, and several other things were destroyed. All of them have been properly valued, and over 100 million, I'm talking about 168 plus million, went just one day off. All of these people, what is life to them today? Those who survived. And you saw some of them who were still on drips in the hospital, and this is recent, in the hospital as they gave the interview. Some of them are completely deformed. Completely deformed. They can't go to work anymore, and yet they had dependents. They don't have anyone to take care of them. This situation obviously presents yet another such situation. What exactly are we doing? Kintampo happened recently. You know what? We said it's an act of God, but there were other things that led to it. End of story? Right. Now, Dr. Ayu, the government is giving indications after the cabinet meeting, and we'll look at those and ask what is new.
Right.
That it is going to stop this once and for all. First of all, what is your assessment of what happened? And what do you say of the approach by the state?
Okay, thank you very much, Samson. A very good morning again to your listeners.
And I forgot, I needed to give credit. That video, for those of you who are listening on radio, you didn't have the fullest benefit. That video was done by One Ghana, One Ghana movement. It's a very new movement. Its board is chaired by Dr. Joyce Aye. I know guys like Kofi Abochi of Gempa who are all on.
The Ghana people are trouble. Occupy Ghana, Citizen Ghana, One Ghana. Watch out, government.
And that's One Ghana movement was put together by Philip Ashon. You know Philip Ashon, CTFM, great guy. Thank you all for that piece. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Thoughts and prayers still with the families. And it's so clear that the president was worried when he got to the scene. For me, the situation at stake is one of the kind that I also put the blame squarely at the doorstep of the operator. I put it squarely at the doorstep of the operator. Why am I saying so? I'm saying this because within about a month or so, the NPA had cautioned and sent them notification of some standards that were being compromised. And they had to change or for them to come and revisit and review the position. Secondly, the same gas station, it gets to a point that you are saying that as a medical doctor, if my license ends, I'm cautioned to make, I'm cautioned. I made sure that by 31st of December, my license is renewed before the other year. But I've been made to understand that his license has expired and he's in the process of renewing it. The same...
As a lawyer, you don't get a caution. You just lose the right to go to court.
Exactly.
So you can't work.
Exactly. Then you also get to another position on the issue where you're looking at where the discharge of the gas came at a time which was later than the regulated or the guideline. So you are also worried about that situation. Then you have an owner who also gets into the place and talks about a kebab thing. It was interesting when the owner was speaking about that kebab theory, and I was asking myself, why is this man pushing the issue too? You understand? I was worried about that. You know,
and you got a good sponsor in Kojo Yanson.
Oh, well,
it's been hard for him this week, I guess.
Definitely, definitely, it will be. And you hear of when the leakage seemingly was occurring, and you have the driver running for dear life and asking the rest of them to leave the scene. Meanwhile, if you read the guidelines by the World Association of LPG Gases Association in Ireland, it talks about drivers are supposed to be persons that are actually even certified because they have an understanding of how much liquid must be in their tanks, the safety, the standards of delivery of the gas. And you hear there was supposed to be a suction pump somewhere to have been applied at a point in time. All of these protocols from the transporter to the gas station and also the workers, none of them were involved. So it tells you that they also ran for their life. You understand? So if you look at this and you put them together, the negligence, there's some sort of negligence that borders on health safety, adherence to standard operating procedures, which was neglected. And therefore, I put this issue right at the doorstep of the operator. You see? But the issue at stake also is one of a kind that you can't sometimes take away the role of the public servants as well. You see, NPA, the CEO, he's been in office for not more than probably 6 months. And you and I know, when you get to any office, you have to diagnose the situation, organizational structure, board structure, implementation policy. At least there's no law. But some 6 months or 7 months, though you are dealing with the current issues, need you to find some footing in trying to redirect in line with your policy or in line with your vision. And therefore,
but in the case of this NPA boss,
yes,
within that short period that he has been in office, that you are saying he needs to get down and organize himself, he had actually been able to detect something that was going on wrong there and had issued, letters for the necessary compliance, except that they were not fully compliant.
Exactly. So that is fine. So this is the case that I'm coming to a certain point, that you have permanent officers. Permanent officers here, change of government, none of you are changed. You are kept as your directors. You are the health and safety people, you are the monitoring team. Normally, change of government, you are public servants, you do your work. The point here also that we need to be asking ourselves questions is those persons who are supposed to be paid by the taxpayer to ensure that, to enforce, have they been doing that over and over? And then you come to that point where you hear of Diarga's new theory that there are some big men who sometimes obstruct the process for these agencies to be able to work. He is a bold guy, very bold. What he said has its pros and cons, but in as much as you take it out into one context, he's trying to let you understand that we Ghanaians make life difficult for ourselves in implementation of the, yes. Because you have a pastor, you have a religious person, you have a politician, you have a financier. In the midst of you trying to implement the law, they would want to obstruct and you temper it with mercy.
But that doesn't make you bold. If he curtailed it.
Oh, no, he's been able to tell you.
I'm
saying that he's been able to tell you. No, it's two sides. I've not come to the other side, which is a different thing altogether. But he has tried to, he's brought something out to the public for you to know how difficult we as a people, we make it so difficult in trying to implement a policy. That is different from you also trying to, as somebody we have put you in position of trust, for you to adhere and therefore submit to. That one, the law is not a respecter of individuals. So when I told you that it has two sides, when I get to that area, it's a different thing altogether. But then also, what he said, is it revealing? Is it trying to let us know that we Ghanaians make life difficult for state agencies? You see that part? That is the angle I'm bringing on the board.
To some, that may be revealing. To others, that may be just a natural expectation of what the reaction should be. If you want to close down a gas station, and gas station, I mean, represents both LPG and
fuel,
gasoline, whatever it is. Yes, you expect that people's livelihood are at stake here. Those who set up those stations, their families, those who depend on them and all of that, they will come with reactions, begging and all of that.
That is where I am happy with the new guideline by Cabinet. You see, there is that bit that it cures. It tells you that the law is no respecter of persons. It tells you straight away what you have to do. Some parts of it, it brings in innovation. It brings in the global practice, the current practice. And then it also enforces what you need to have done. So therefore, if anybody thinks it's bigger than the law, whoever person at those agencies now know that there is a total support by His Excellency, and for that matter, government. And so nobody, whether you are a financier, you are a pastor, you are this, you see, that directive is so bold. So I'm trying to bring an existing problem, where as a people, we make life difficult for state institutions. And therefore, you look at the new guidelines, that says that it's no respecter of you, regardless of who you are. And at this point, it is so clear that if you are in charge of any state agency, and you don't implement, your head will be on the line.
All right.
Because clearly, you have been given the mandate and you have been asked to enforce without respect to you.
So hold on, we have a lot to talk about. If just in a minute you can say what you wanted to say by way of some rebuttal of sorts.
Yes, I'm surprised that it is turning out the other way in terms of, because I heard that social media was agog with stories about my statement. But what happened was that I got a call from a radio station. They asked about the efforts that I put into dealing with the problem. And they asked me, what challenges were you confronted with?
And I'm actually going to get...
Yeah, I said that the challenges are that the regulators come under pressure from influential people, including pastors, imams, friends, family members, colleagues, and sometimes party financiers. That was the point that I made. And I gave examples. I said I know of a DCE who, based on a directive from the national level, insisted on not allowing a certain guy to set up a fuel station. And up to date, that man hasn't forgiven the DCE. I know the two of them personally. That's why I'm saying this. So I started that as an example. So the DCE on the ground, they're trying to implement a directive, the kind of directive that you're talking about, has incurred displeasure. And there are many people who just will not want to put themselves in that situation.
Okay.
So, and I said that the people who are putting pressure on regulators, they should know that any of them could be by the fuel station when the accident occurred. I said either you, the pastor yourself, or your wife, or you, the minister yourself, or your wife could have been near the gas station when the explosion occurred.
All right.
So when regulators are fixing these issues, let us stay off the kind of pressures that make it difficult. Precisely.
Right. We should rather encourage
a quick one. The minister is part of the regulators. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, there are regulatory institutions.
Because you have a supervisory role.
Yes, you have a supervisory role. Yeah, I brought myself in because I recall that
you were contacted by people who sought to influence you.
There was a fuel station.
Don't worry, I'll pay a little focus on you and what you did or did not do. We'll get there.
So you get what I'm saying? That right. The new directive cures some of this.
Okay.
Recognizes this problem.
And we'll get to the new directive specifics one by one. Right. Now, Ace has already got notes. Right. So
it's got about
10
sheets.
So let's know what your assessment of the situation also is. But contrast what Cabinet appears to be doing now with what Ayariga speaks about, that my hands are tied. I get to a place, I see wrong is about to occur or wrong is going on. I want to stop them, but they have received all the permits that they need to get. And so I can't do anything. Look, this government says, if you are building, stop. No more constructions. These people would have had the permit before they started doing them. We know of the Galamsey fight. There are small-scale miners who already have their licenses, and yet there was a moratorium. We know of, if you like, this example, an awkward one maybe, the Eastern Cubic situation. They said, we have all these licenses. The government says, go to hell. Because we need to protect the majority. Right.
Well, look. Once Mohammed determined that there was this problem, and that although the law appears to have been applied with, there was a danger. The problem then was the process. So there shall be the need to go back to tinker with the process and to cure and to remove all the fault along the line where the people can willy-nilly get the licenses, but there's still the danger. If the licensing regime produces a danger, the problem is the licensing regime. And so that is why I'm gratified by some of these steps. I'm not going to shout uhuru yet. I've read them. It looks like it could fix it, but fix it first before you get any word of praise from anybody. But let's deal with these things. And I like one thing Mohammed said, that we should start suing.
And Ace's reference to Mohammed is Mahama Yari. When they were students, when he was
a student,
he was
called Mohammed.
He was known as Mohammed.
And I used to be his intern.
Yes, he used to work with him.
I used to work with him.
Yes.
Raymond,
and Tadiosori. The three of them.
Yes,
the three naughty boys. Now, whom to sue? Yes, the operator. If there's proof of negligence, duty of care, what's the standard, breach of it, damage. How about those who have breached their statutory duty? Because the law imposes a duty on you to regulate. If you are unable to regulate or you neglect the regulation and damage occurs, well, the principles of breach of statutory duty lead to actions against the state when some of these incidents occur. Look, it is because we all can't protect ourselves individually that we live in this community called Ghana. Ghana is not divided into 27 million pieces of earth that everybody will occupy his and live the rest of his life. So we have a parliament, and we ask parliament to make sure that there are laws to protect us. Trust me, I think Ghana's parliament passes some of the most beautiful laws. If you look at the NPA Act, passed only in 2005, the NPA is to grant licenses to applicants, which means that you can't operate without a license. It appears people are operating without licenses. They must maintain a register, keep record on data of licenses, petroleum products, and petroleum service providers. Look at how beautiful it is. Provide guidelines even for petroleum marketing, protect the interest of consumers, monitor standards of performance and the quality of provision of services. So we have vested the MPA with this power. It is beautiful. Look, one, investigate on a regular basis the operations of petroleum service providers to ensure conformity with the best practice and protocols in the petroleum downstream industry. And so as for the verbiage, the wording, we have it. And we don't stop there. We then give the MPA the power to make further regulations to provide for the discipline of licensees. It says that it is to prescribe standards of performance, provide for protection of consumers, regulate licensing, I like this, and control the importation, exportation, landing, loading, unloading, and transportation of petroleum products. It is to control it. Provide for storage, handling, and safety of petroleum products, and for the licensing of places in which petroleum products are stored. So when it comes to the law, we have given the MPA power and given the MPA even power to make further regulations to acquire more power to keep us safe. So maybe Parliament has done its bit. But once Parliament does this, it hands it over to the next arm of government, the executive, to make sure that the licensing and regulation happens. And that is where the failing starts. Because as Mohammed is telling us, so-called influential people can pop up and stop the law from operating. What kind of nation are we? We need to start going back to the brass tacks. And it is all of us. We need to start the routine and spot inspections of each of these facilities on a regular basis, some routine, some on the spot. This is what MPA ought to be allowed to do. They were paying a lot of petroleum taxes. Hello, government, can you put some of those petroleum taxes into keeping us safe? Now, who is enforcing the safety standards? What are the discharge protocols? That if a valve starts leaking, the driver and mate, the only safety protocol they know is to run away and tell those who hear them to run away, so that surrounding businesses, including a kebab business, is affected. Look at all the pictures of people.
At least he began to evacuate the place. He began to announce that people should run away.
Wow.
Occupy Ghana you issued a statement that's rather technical about what ought to have been done that appears not to have been done.
Yes. Look, are you saying that the only safety measure he knows is to run away? So his only safety measure is to protect his life and those who might hear him. So what about those who don't hear him? What is the perimeter? How much? Look, so do we have rules on alarm systems in these stations? So it's not one man and his mate running away and say, run away, run away. But there's an alarm that the people in the area know that if you hear this alarm, run. So if the only safety measure is to run, then make sure everybody else runs. Right? Now, how often are we doing drills, fire drills, alarms, education of surrounding people? And you're right, of people, residents and businesses. You can see a fuel station everywhere, but there's something your EPA officer didn't tell you. I have seen it several times. The rules on discharging. The tank arrives, it doesn't immediately start discharging. You can just observe it. Because I lived opposite one, and I saw, after what you see, everybody's been cleared, the cars have been moved away, they block the station, and then start discharging. So they are not having the incidents and accidents we are having because there's a strict enforcement of the protocols. Yes. And if there's a breach, you will be punished. You won't have a life again. Here, the influential people will appear to beg that don't license, and they'll appear to beg when you want to punish. Nobody's going to listen to you in those other places. So when we give those examples, we should give the examples in whole, not in part. Now, is it doable? I think it is. Let me give an example. I'm finding out for the first time that for 20 years, Ghana has been running a research reactor that has been doing nuclear studies for 20 years, to the extent that we even had enriched uranium in this country. We haven't heard of an accident. When we decided, in line with the decisions of the Nuclear Security Summit, that we won't do high enriched uranium anymore, we shipped it out of Ghana. But you should see the picture we saw on the net. This was 1 kilogram of uranium. You should see the container that it was in. some huge container with people wearing the reflectors and the plane ready to take it out, which means that at least from where I sit, there were protocols. So why was it doable by the Atomic Energy Commission? Maybe because no politician is interested in nuclear. There's no money for them there. There's no money for influential people there. And so it is possible that the technical people can do it. But as you're saying, sometimes the technical process use the problem itself.
Who says that? Go and see the atomic energy lands. There's supposed to be a certain perimeter that
we saw them. People have
gone to encroach those.
People are living on them.
All are infringements of the nuclear safety.
Tor, for instance, they've been refining crude for a long period, natural gases, fair storage, to transport. You've not had incidences as this, you know. So when you adhere to right protocols,
it is doable. But why did I say
the is able to do it?
We ourselves must begin to comply. In our various buildings, where are the fire hydrants? It is part of our law. Look, something you know, Ghana has one of the most beautiful building codes you can ever find, world standard. But it is notorious for it being ignored by everybody. Do you know that after your building, you're supposed to get an occupancy certificate before you move in, where they will check on fire drills, whether you have a hydrant system that takes water to every floor. In the case, now when you talk of these things, you sound like you're from out of space. Well, the people in space aren't getting burned, right? They are not getting burned. Now, look, fire service will come in. Do we know, for example, that our fire extinguishers have expiry dates? How many of the people in your building know how to use a fire extinguisher? Is there a mandatory fire drill for all public officers? You know, for all public offices or offices to which the public have access? We are not doing it. So let me make this point. The politicians won't fix this. The experts won't fix this. The regulators will not. The operators will not. The citizens will go and beg the ministers not to. It is Ghana that must fix this. If we all decide that the proper thing must be done and damn the financial circumstances. But for now, we are looking at the money that people make. And for that reason, the rules are not being enforced. Let's enforce the rules and let the heavens fall. And so I support what is starting, but the civil society isn't going to let government off the hook. We are going to be on their backs. Leave Hassan Tampuli to do this. He will fix it. Let's let the experts and the experts advising him. Let's stop the political pressure. Allow the people who have been put in those places to do their work. Mr. Pastor, Bishop, Imam, party financier, back off. Allow the ministers and the professionals to do their work. Don't do what you did to Paul Mohammed. You are to blame for what happened. You should be ashamed of yourself if you ever said that this should happen. You are part of the reason why this country is where it is at. And it will not be allowed to happen again. And Hassan knows.
Well, I remember when the June 3rd thing happened, we all said never again.
Yes.
Yeah. But
we have held the anniversaries, which are tagged never again.
Yes, it's unfortunate. Really, almost everything has been said here. But I found out not too long ago, it's even less than an hour ago, I'm still trying to peruse some of the records that were delivered to for my attention. And I realized that from 2006, and occasionally it's reviewed or updated, 2010 something happened, 2016 something happened. The Ghana Standards Authority and the National Environmental Protection Agency and the National Petroleum Authority have actually been engaged in a certain collaboration to craft standards, guidelines for the downstream industry in the petroleum sector. I'm sure my brother Ayarga will know better than I do. And I've just seen some of the guidelines and standards and things, and even the reviews and all that. But it looks as if fantastic standards and guidelines, but in terms of execution, in terms of operationalization, there's a deficit, and a huge one. Interestingly, before the cabinet meeting last Thursday, I think the Standards Authority. Signed, the governing board sent some recommendations, to government. and they recaptured some of those things. And if you look at the paragraph 6 of the government statement, and I would want to read it, it says the immediate incorporation of standards and guidelines developed by the Ghana Standards Authority on the handling, storage, and distribution of LPG and other petroleum products as technical regulations to strengthen the enforcement regime. Technical regulations. It looks as if there's an attempt now to, upgrade the standards and guidelines and give it a firmer basis in terms of technical regulations. That's about what the Standards Authority are suggesting now. Otherwise, these things were left there, not that they were useless, very important standards and guidelines, but it looks as if they didn't have a firm grounding. And what, apart from the lack of firm grounding, actually ensuring compliance with those guidelines in the field was a deficit. So, for instance, government makes a point. Let me read this second one. There's paragraph 7. The recruitment by NPA of 200 safety auditors to join the staff of the Factories Inspectorate Department of the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations to check regularly on all stations to ensure full compliance with safety standards and practices. The letter have cited from the Standards Authority to Cabinet, or if you like, government, indicates that the Ghana Standards Authority have actually a fair share of auditors and personnel that are trained for this specific thing. So maybe we have to look at whether we need to recruit a new 200, or whether the 200 should not be incorporated into the Standards Authorities section rather than the forest factories inspection. These are not technical. I'm not competent really in dealing with those things. I'm thinking aloud. No, but it looks as if we have in place, even if not sufficient, some level of capacity, some level of legal regime that ought to have been activated over the period that we were not doing. So this could be the reason why we are here again today discussing this issue. I've seen an interim report, and some of the things is raised in terms of what's the safety, I'm not sure which word to use, but how we train in terms of those who are involved in the downstream. I've seen what is supposed to be a preliminary report of the National Petroleum Authority, not the fire service. But I suspect they might be working together as well. And if you go looking for the source of this whole thing, this recent one.
And the MPA's boss on the line, we'll speak to him shortly to get further
Then
details.
you might as well talk to him.
But you go to that point to finish your point.
There's page 3 of 8 pages. It says interactions. Following interactions with some members of the LPG truck drivers and installers associations, it came to light that a driver's mate observed a leakage during the discharge process and attempted to fix it but failed. The leaked and expanding LPG then engulfed the plant and the road and subsequently ignited after finding a heat source. Now, the significant point here is here's a situation where the driver's mate was the one attempting to fix the leakage. Question, is he well trained for that? The driver himself trained for that? The attendants at the station trained for that?
It appears obviously they are not, because they were taking flights and asking the crews to also run.
Yes, so you see that's the point. So in terms of safety, how do we really, those in the industry, apart from those of us who might have been there by chance because we are buying fuel or buying gas, the first line of defense, I think, should be those, one, in charge of the station there, two, those who are bringing the material product to discharge. If they have a certain level of training or capacity, it might help. No, fortunately for this, I think the emergency services as well as the security services actually did good in this particular instance. Otherwise, the
Vice President commended them.
Yeah, it's a fact. They did really well. This same report talks of, I think, what the MPA had done earlier. You referred to earlier. It said that's paragraph 4. Inspection of the plant was carried out in April 2017 during the main LPG inspections and monitoring exercise, and identified shortcomings duly communicated in a letter dated 10 July 2017 by the authority to the operator through Hills Oil Company Limited. a compliance, that's paragraph 5, a compliance monitoring inspection exercise was carried out on the facility on 17 July 2017 and observed that some of the shortcomings identified during the previous inspections had been rectified, including evidence of training for the pump attendants, among others. So yes, there's an attempt to train the pump attendant, but I don't know which technical area.
Okay.
You could train them, but not necessarily give them capacity to deal with leakage.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us on the phone, and we understand that you are traveling, but you've made time for us. Hassan Tampuli, Al-Hassan Tampuli, thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now, as the head of the MPA, you briefed the president to the hearing of all of us in the public, and we heard all the things you had to say. But before we get to whether or not you may have failed by not insisting after you discovered that there were certain, lapses to ensure that those were quickly dealt with, what do we know now, preliminarily, to be the cause of this disaster?
Thank you very much, Samson. So let me just take you for the briefing that we gave to the president. The briefing that we gave to the president mentioned that we had done some monitoring inspection exercise at that particular station in April. So we do it again in July. September, by the time that this accident happened, we have gone there again and we've seen that they have rectified all the problems that we expected that they took. What they didn't do fully was a total decongestion of the forecourt. So you could still see short drivers and some taxi drivers picking and discharging passengers, just in front of the forecourt. And normally what happens is when you go on monitor inspection exercise, you serve compliance notice from the sorting station, and you follow up with the finder, then you go with the enforcement. That is the standard laid-down procedure that we have at the authority. But with the benefit of what has happened, maybe we have to modify that arrangement. We insist upon the first instance that you have to correct it or shut down immediately. So we have taken note of the shortcomings in the operation, standard operation mechanism that we have. Going forward, we insist that immediately we come to any shortcomings, we will close down.
Right. But preliminarily, you have put a finger on what caused this disaster, right?
From our preliminary observation, the receiving vessel, at the time that the vehicle got to the station, information that we have, that is from our findings, is that the vessel was about 85% full prior to the new consignment. Now, it's standard that when the vessel is 85%, you can't load any more. You cannot load it more than 85%. So that is very, very standard. It's also standard operation procedure that in the industry that you can only receive products from a sponsoring oil marketing company and not a third party unless the NPA gives you authorization. And we also have it as part of our guidelines that discharge should not be done after 6 p.m. Now, quite clearly, the product was sourced from a third-party oil marketing company and not the oil marketing company that is sponsoring the plantation on this occasion. So it was difficult for anybody to have known that the product was even being taken to their station.
Okay.
Obviously, that's an infraction of the regulation. And then maybe to hide what they were doing or to back their position, the discharge was done after 6 p.m. Probably just to keep it away from the cyanide of the merchant team members. So the mate and the driver who were doing the discharge were not present at the scene at the time. The driver had moved away apparently from the reporter, and then he left the exercise in the hands of the police, who obviously didn't have the requisite training. So upon sensing a little leakage, he immediately took to his heels and started calm down the alarm, telling everybody to also run for their life. That is not what a trained driver's mate or driver will do upon any leakage that he has sent. You have to find a way of sealing the leakage or tightening the coupling, the breakaway coupling, before you can call for assistance, but not to the sense of trouble take to your heels.
Do I hear you say that this could have been avoided?
Almost all the accidents that have happened could have been avoided. Almost all the accidents that have happened could have been avoided. For instance, the one that happened at the treatment site. It happened because at the time of loading, the truck had been loaded way beyond the 85% threshold, leaving very little room for circulation, and then pressure had built up. So if that hadn't been done, obviously that could have been avoided. Now, the one that happened in Takrati also follows the same pattern. The driver and the mate sensed some leakage and immediately healed. Now, that incident, we have taken the drivers, the transporters, and their owners some amount of training. The records show that a lot of them were training.
Okay, you're breaking a bit, but well, I don't know how to complain about it because you are far away from us here, and we can only hope that the situation can normalize a bit. Can I hear you? Let me see if it's better. Okay, the line is getting really bad. No, he's not in the country. Thank you very much. We've been speaking to Hassan Tampule, who is the MPA's head. Now, he has pointed out things that clearly show the level of what Asankuma and, if you like, Mahama Yarga, and then particularly Dr. Yu refers to, he says, he places the blame squarely. He said squarely on the operator. Now, it's a question of negligence that we're talking about. Hassan Tampuli says the time for discharge, for example, was wrong. That was not the time they were supposed to do the discharge. Besides, those who were involved in the discharge ought not to have been running away and asking other people to run away. But my next question to him is, when he says this is avoidable and all the others were avoidable, what role were they supposed to play to have actually ensured that this would have been avoided? In the June 3 situation, these are some of the recommendations. And as if Ace had read the report, he was just regurgitating that to us. Now, the recommendations included that the government, through the EPA, NPA, NCCA, and other concerned institutions, should intensify is the watchword, education on the risks involved in living close to petroleum substances, especially fuel service stations and LPG stations. Guess what? A colleague sends me a message. He lives by this gas station, and he says, I live just about 300 meters away from the scene. We have complained about the poor standard being observed at that station several times without remedy. Now, the recommendations also included that OMCs should ensure an immediate shutdown and evacuation of all persons at their stations in the event of serious floods and fire as safety measures against any disaster. OMCs should ensure that they evacuate their service stations at the smell of or citing the least displacement of petroleum products during floods. Safety protocols as far as fires and explosions are concerned should be mandatory. Ace was asking about drills? Routine? Do we have them going on? Mandatory for fuel stations attendants and supervisors. They should be trained and certified.
Certified.
Yes, trained and certified. The government should equip the Ghana National Fire Service with modernized firefighting equipment, including aerial firefighting equipment such as helicopters and hydraulic platforms. Okay, they said this. I'm just reading just a couple of them. That OMC should discourage the congregation of large numbers of persons, individuals, near petroleum products. Facilities such as restaurants, churches, and banks should not be located near fuel stations. The regulating and monitoring agencies, NPA, EPA, Ghana National Fire Service, factories, inspectorates departments, the Ghana Standards Authority, etc., should ensure, once again check, stringent compliance and monitoring regime of all service stations nationwide. Stations that do not meet the required standards should be closed down, and made to upgrade. I'll skip all the rest and just read one more. EPA should liaise with MPA to train and certify, once again, training and certify all categories of filling station attendants, all categories of filling stations attendants on health and safety issues. And of course, they suggested legislation could also be one of the ways that they should look at. How far have we gone in implementing this? Do we have Hassan back on the line? Okay, we'll take a break. We'll be right back.